Call the meeting to order. Peter, if you would do the honors.
Sure. Rickert?
Here.
Epstein?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Dornbrick here. And O'Grady?
Here.
Full
Any
board.
announcements, Rick?
Yes, welcome to the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District's regular board meeting. This meeting is being fed live over the internet, and the public can view this meeting by going to www.kmpud.com and following the appropriate link. If the public would like to make a comment or ask a question, please email me, ransel, R-A-N-S-E-L, at kmpud.com. We will ask that the public please identify yourselves when making comments.
Good, thank you. Frank, any comments? You are the audience.
Hopefully there's many more people out there on the internet, but
Right.
No comments from Kirkwood Property Services Developments. Please proceed.
Any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar? Moving on, for the adoption of the consent calendar, this would be approved the regular board meeting minutes of January 12th, the emergency board meeting minutes of January 22nd, the consent for claims, and the review of receivable shutoffs. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
We'll start off with items for board action. Items 8A, finances. You're handling everything today, or Standish?
Just briefly, in the board's packet is actually the December financials, which we will not review. I was unable to attend the Finance Committee to give Kelly McBride's report. I was secretly escorted through Carson Pass by Caltrans because I'm the fire chief. But I believe Standish O'Grady attended the meeting fully and could probably give the update to the board. And I give it to Standish.
I can walk through Kelly's stuff if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So starting on page, Eric's here to back me up. Starting on page 24, which is the combined income statement, there are two things that she highlighted. One is that we're over, okay, so this is the balance sheet. The total capital assets construction in progress has declined significantly, $159,000, because we had to basically expense the work that we had done on the Out Valley switch station, the second switch station, which we, of course, didn't complete when we closed out the PG&E deal. So we had to take construction in progress off and run it through the income statement or expense line. The second thing is that our cash is significantly higher than planned because we didn't invest in the cushion of credit. I believe we sent in $700,000 after December 31st for the cushion and credit, but the government's going to return that to us because the cushion of credit mechanism has been discontinued by the federal government, so we no longer have that option.
Oh, that's too bad.
And one of the things that came out of the Finance Committee meeting is that that was like a 5% earner, and our bank is like a 0.1 or 0.2% earner, and so there's a group of people led by Alan Sapp and Mark Duvall are going to look into something in between. In other words, brokerage account money market rates these days are about 2.5%, and so it may benefit us to go there.
Why did the government cancel that program? Or shouldn't I open that door?
We don't know.
Yeah.
Eric Christensen probably has better answer. They probably just closed the loophole, meaning it was a loophole that we were benefiting from, and yeah. So turning to
The loophole was the 5%, not
Right.
the concept.
correct, it's a 5% giveaway, right? And so they wanted to close that down. Turning to page 26, you'll see in other. There's $100,000 in additional revenue because we had to take that in property tax earmarks in order to meet tier ratio covenants with Russ. And that's required because we had to expense the $193,000 of construction in progress. And the construction in progress expense, of course, is something that we spent many years ago and is a non-cash item. Revenue for the year is up by about $250,000, including the $100,000 of property tax, so $167,000 without that. And our year-to-date operating income is up from plan by almost $200,000. Skipping forward to slide 30, water is slightly ahead of plan in terms of revenue by $3,300, and operating income is better than planned by almost $20,000. Wastewater is a similar and actually better situation. We're up by plan by $33,000 in terms of revenue, and we've lost $80,000 less than planned, so we're ahead there. Our only significant expense note is that we spent almost $4,000 on the wastewater treatment plant boundary line adjustment for the potential Bank of the West loan that we had sought but are not seeking currently. Electricity fund, again, this is where the $100,000 of earmarked property taxes or allocated property taxes are run through the revenue line, and where the $193,000 of construction in progress expense is in 3 line items: salaries and wages, operations and maintenance, and contract services. For the year, we're up by $100,000 from plan, including the $100,000 of property tax allocation, so basically on plan from an operating income standpoint.
So a question, do we get that, if we have a good year, do we get the $100,000 back into the fund? That's like a guarantee, right? So if we sell enough electricity, do we?
My understanding is that it's measured on a calendar year basis. So December was the calendar year, so we don't get it back. In other words, it's what Kelly and Eric and everybody else need to earmark for the income statement in order to comply with RUST for the calendar year, December 31st.
The good news is...
So the answer to your question is I don't think we get it back.
It's spent, basically.
I use the word allocate because it's an allocation, literally. It's not a cash expenditure.
The good news is that in the last calendar year, it turned out that Kelly did the calculation just recently. Including this $100,000, only $250,000 of property taxes had to be allocated to electric, to comply with RUS requirements, and that's versus over $500,000 that have been budgeted. So that means that we have $200,000 or $300,000 more of property taxes to allocate to other departments.
Okay, that's
which is the good news.
List, yeah.
Yeah, which is the good news. Yeah.
Anticipating some expenses in the coming year.
Page 36 is the next page that Kelly has footnotes on, and basically propane is up by $10,000 on a revenue basis and down $2,600 on an operating income basis. So I'd say that's essentially on plan. Turning to page 38, which is a balance sheet comparison of December 2018 versus 2017, there are no significant variances. Cash is down by $295,000, and cushion of credit is down by $625,000. In any case, there are no significant notes. Income statement, same thing. We're up by $200,000 on a revenue basis, and we're down by $243,000 on, where is it? Operating. We're basically on plan, $496,000 of profit versus $495,000. January 2019 preliminary income statement, which is slide 40, where the only real number on here, everything else is a budget number, is the operating revenue line, so we're up $113,000 in January, good January, and we're up $381,000 from budget for the year. Slide 41 is our cash waterfall, operating cash waterfall, and January 2019, we have $1.864 million of cash in the bank, $785,000 of cushion of credit, so $2.6 million of total operating cash versus a budget of $2.7. We're $56,000 below plan, which I consider right on plan. And again, as to remind everybody, our low here is December 2020, our projected low of $1.4 million. This is all after paying off PG&E, which is probably a manageable number, but we don't have a lot in the way of reserves. And then slide 46 is our known budget variances for this year. Pretty small, some snow removal overages early on, and then there's this $193,000 of non-cash expense for the switch station accrued costs write-off. Any question? Anything you'd add, Eric?
Just one thing, and that is on slide 35 is the snow removal. This is, I think, apropos to our later discussion. And that is, you'd see that we're $16,000 or $17,000 under. I mean, we've spent $16,000 or $17,000 less than budget so far, which means that, and that's including that unexpected overage that's listed on the variance slide. So that means that we've got some room to absorb the overtime that's been going into snow removal more recently.
I have a question. Do we anticipate any more expenses from PG&E, or are we?
My understanding, Peter, is we're completely done paying PG&E.
Okay.
Forever.
Wow. But of course, we have to fund for depreciation for what we own, right?
Correct. We have to expense depreciation, for our assets, which are significant.
Do we have a plan for that, or how much we need to put in per annum?
I think it's in the budget. I don't know the number.
Okay.
And again, that's sort of a non-cash expense. In other words, we expense it, we count it against operating income, but we accrue cash for it, with the idea being that it's a reserve for replacing that line 35 years from now when it's not going to be either you or my problem.
We're maintaining that one section
Correct.
of overhead. I think that's our biggest vulnerability, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on the financials?
It is, but the things that have been breaking are the
Well, the comm line,
Yeah.
and the bridges.
back to you, Chairman.
Okay.
Or-
Just a couple other budget variances that are going to pop up. We're currently repairing a high core machine and approved an estimate of $14,000 for parts for that, so you'll possibly see that in variance. Of course, you mentioned the wastewater treatment plant boundary line, $4,000. A T1 line repair, estimated at $9,000, essentially. And then finally, a centrifuge at VFD. The initial estimate was around $12,000. We still have not received a formal invoice from Tesco. We've been asking for it for several months, and emails went out to supervisors yesterday to get these invoices so we can budget accordingly. And that's it for financials for me.
What is High
I have pretty pictures of it, so I will refer to my...
You're going to become familiar with it, trust me. Next few months.
It's usually not good.
Yeah, it's not good.
Okay, anything else on the financials? If not, we'll move on to 8C, mission statement and strategic goals.
Now we have performance report?
B.
Oh, on the, let me
Yeah, page one.
Talk about
I'm sorry, yes.
I'll be brief. Performance reporting, we do have the January numbers numbers in at the Operations Committee meeting. We were still dealing with December numbers. January for electric was a good month. We had purchased a little over 1 million kilowatt hours off of the Cal ISO grid. We had 56,780 kilowatt hours of loss, putting us at 6% for the month, 11% for the year. So we're slightly under we're slightly better than our goal there. Propane, we continue to be negative. We are running at a pretty significant negative streak here since October. We're at a negative 6% loss for the year. For water, we also had a good month. We had 1.8 million gallons produced from our wells. We ended up with a negative loss in water this month, and that is unusual. We are attributing that to the storage capacity of our tanks this month versus last month. So we're right around 0% loss for the month of January. Still over for the year at 19%, but I expect that number will come down as we continue through the year.
I don't remember the November column being so weird.
I'm sorry, what's that?
The November column for water production shows an 89% unidentified losses, and I think it's a math. I don't think that's. I don't think that's correct either, Eric. Let me double check.
I think that's going to help your 19% quite a lot.
Excellent. I'll take all the help I can get.
Yeah.
I'll double check that and send a correction around.
We did have some issues, but I don't know, 89%.
No, that does not look right to me.
Well, I think the problem is the third line, the 918,000. It should be. Looks like it should be 51,000.
Right.
Not 918,000.
I agree. Sorry about that. We will get it corrected. Lastly, on this wastewater, we had a pretty reasonable month. More than 2 million gallons went through the plant. We found 239,000 gallons of I&I, which puts us at 11% for the month, and that is steady 11% for the year as well. So we continue to see good results from wastewater. We are just hoping this holds through the spring melt. And then just a note on the aquifer levels page that's in your packet. Well 4 or 5 aquifer level average for the month of January was 104 feet. January historically is our low point, but this is lower than previous years by about 15 feet, so we're continuing to monitor that and trying to rest that well as much as possible so that we can have that number rebound.
Do you know a reason for that?
We had some wells that were down that made us use well 4 or 5 more than we usually would in the winter. Well 2 was down for a significant portion of November, December. So we believe it's just overtaxing and that it will recover with resting. And that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Do you have any ongoing electricity initiatives, in other words, to continue to improve system losses, or are you sort of satisfied?
We are still working on the commercial meter testing. We attempted to, but did not get Trimark out here to look at the lake pump transformer during snowmaking season. The only transformers that we have with meters on them that we haven't tested are the lake pumps, and then we have the snowmaking compressor transformer up at the powerhouse that potentially some room for improvement exists. Other than that, we need to continue that program, periodically testing these meters. We've gone through all of the distribution system. We feel pretty good that we don't have any remaining unmetered services, but what we have not done is gone through to check and do a comparison of our residential meters, and we would like to do that, but that'll be a sometime down the line project.
Good, thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.
So now we'll move on to 8C, mission statement and strategic goals. Rick?
Yes, in the board's packet on pages 50 through 52, it looks like, is the mission statement that's been discussed previously and revised slightly. And essentially, the mission statement is to maintain and enhance the quality of life in Kirkwood by providing our customers with safe, reliable services and provide those services openly, transparently, efficiently, and cost-effective. So this is the final draft, just looking for additional comments from the board before we approve this mission statement for our district.
So the planning committee spent some time with this, and you see the word transparently in there. A couple of the committee members felt that it was important to include that. Other committee members wondered if there's really a difference between the two words, openly and transparently. But I think that, so from my perspective and the committee's ultimate perspective, it was that there is a difference. I mean, openly, we're open because we're required to be open by California law. We have open meetings, publicly announced. We comply with the Brown Act, et cetera. The transparently is just the next level, where we provide data to the greatest extent possible. We put documents on the website. We encourage and involvement of community members and committees. The committees are active. All those things are being more than just open, I think. So anyway, we decided to leave that word in. The second thing I want to point out is what Peter had been concerned about in the economic development thing was that it somehow might imply that we would give one entity some benefits that other entities in the community wouldn't see in order to spur economic development. And I think we all agree that that's not really the intention of the statement. So we put in this word equitably. And then we felt, at least I felt, the need to define that just in case people didn't know what that meant. And that's the reason for a footnote, which is weird to have in a mission statement, strategic goals, but nevertheless, the footnote tries to explain what that means. It just means that one entity won't be favored over another in this quest for economic development, which I think was your concern, Peter. Yeah. The third thing I just want to point out, particularly in regard to the recent discussions about snow removal, I wanted to be sure that we had already included, and it is, in here, where is it? But it's only one line. But in our mission statement, in our strategic goals, customer satisfaction is an important element. We're not just doing things to measure to levels of safety and health, safety, welfare, but we want high customer satisfaction as well. It is in here in one line.
In the goals?
In the strategic goals.
Where is that?
Oh, I've got to find it again. Sorry.
It's under responsibility, service the public, develop and implement high standards of customer service.
Yeah, there's actually
Different than satisfaction.
there's actually the word satisfaction, I think, in here. I think no, that is what it is. So, if I were given the experience that we've had over the last 2 months, I'm just thinking that we should probably add something. I mean, if the board agrees, that we should add something about that and be more explicit that is, we want to be efficient, we want to be effective, but we also want customer satisfaction. So it, obviously implies always finding the right balance between those things, but it's not something we want to ignore.
So where are you proposing to insert that?
Well, it'd probably be under the responsibly serve the public, high standards of customer service and satisfaction. Just add the word satisfaction after service.
That makes sense to me.
So anyways, the committee looked at this, offered edits, offered comments. Bob, do you have any?
No, it's just that it's been the subject of several meetings.
Yeah.
So we've run out of any additional comments.
Well, I think the changes are pretty minimal, which is good, because I think the original document was pretty good.
My main goal was to add the last sentence, the last topic.
Your satisfaction?
No, support responsible
Oh,
economic.
yeah,
Have a
yeah.
debate over whether that's
Right.
our one of our responsibilities or not.
Any other comments? Well, I would propose a motion then that we adopt the changes with the addition of, under the responsibility to serve the public, develop and implement high standards of, or, where would that go? Of customer service to ensure
And satisfaction.
customer
Just say and satisfaction.
and satisfaction.
And that's why we do the surveys
Yeah.
every 2 years, to measure that.
Right.
So that would be the change to this document, and that would be my motion.
I'll second it. You want public comment?
Any comment from anybody? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good. Move on to item 8D, which is a review of our snow removal work. So, Ricky, you want to take the lead on this?
Yes, sir. So, in the board's packet is the mid-season snow removal update on page 53. And this agenda item was also discussed at the recent Operations Committee meeting. We do have copies for the public. If you would like one, Jessica can pass those out over the board as well. This year has been extremely challenging for the district. In this graph here, it illustrates the 92 inches of snow that we received in this last storm cycle. This is from Friday night to essentially Tuesday midday, which was an extreme event for Kirkwood and for the district. I know with both Carson Pass and Carson Spur being closed, the resort being challenged with getting employees to be able to open the resort up fully. It certainly showed us that Kirkwood is a unique place, and we receive a ton of snow. It's how we address that snow, how we remove that snow for our customers, which is important. I'm going to briefly summarize this report, but I want to start off by saying I believe this winter the district has satisfied all the snow removal requirements found in the snow removal contracts for the 22 associations and the 65 private snow removal contracts. However, that said, this picture illustrates it, I do not believe our snow removal service for this year has met the quality of service that the community has become accustomed to over the past several years. And again, in this report, we'll illustrate numerous reasons of why the service has not been to what we're used to. This subject was discussed in the Operations Committee, and I'll go through some of the areas within the report. And I don't want to sit here and make excuses for the district. Honestly, I take full responsibility. Our staff has done an incredible job with the amount of labor that we've had, equipment issues, the timing of the storms, which seem to come on every weekend during the holidays. And, I know that there's a lot of longtime Kirkwood employees that work for the district that have taken a lot of pride and dedication working extreme hours and extreme conditions to do the best that they can, yet we still can do better. So, launching into this, We'll review labor, equipment, routes, the ability to sand, the discussion topics that came out of the Operations Committee for improvements, our ability to give customers immediate notifications when driveways are plowed, or modifying the way we do our job to essentially address the people that are in the Kirkwood Valley and not spend time on driveways where people haven't been up all season, and so, again, making us more efficient. And then finally, we'll talk about GPS use and data, and Bertrand Perot will also give a presentation to the board on some facts and findings that he's had from the GPS data as well. For labor, again, as I mentioned before, it's been a very difficult season to hire staff. With only about 50% of the applicants that we initially looked for were able to meet the minimum requirements, essentially having a clean driver's license. We interviewed numerous people. We solicited in all the local newspapers, as well as Indeed.com, and received just a handful of applicants that were actually interested in coming up and removing snow. We continue to push to hire applicants, and we've had some success, and recently we've hired a new mechanic who's actually a certified mechanic, Tom Harris. And then another operator just as of 2 days ago, Jack Giovanni, who used to be a Vail Resort employee making snow and is used to hazardous conditions and extreme hours of work, but we're excited to bring him on board as well. Due to these labor shortages, and illustrated in the report, we've had to use, as have we had in the past, other district employees to cover the basis for snow removal, which is an important service that we provide. And so when we do that, as we've talked about in the Operations Committee, it does affect some of our other utility services, i.e. things don't get dug out, things get delayed. And so it impacts not only the district staff, but I think it impacts the community as well, because essentially we are spread thin. So responding to emergencies, issues with water pipes or other things can be delayed when I have to get a person out of a trackless and back into the shop to take care of the problem. But we've done this in the past. This isn't the first time we've had extreme weather, and so we will continue to push forward to try to provide the best service we can for all our utilities, as well as get people trained up within snow removal to do the job as best as possible. Unfortunately, this year we lost 4 seasoned employees who are very familiar with different snow removal routes, the unique places that we can store snow, hazards that are completely lost in the snow, and maybe snow stakes blow over. And if you said, Joe Prowler, go plow a certain driveway in East Meadows, he can tell you every little rock, every little dip, every little scrape that could be a hazard. And for years of experience, he can get around them and do the job quickly and efficiently. If I put a new operator into East Meadows in the very same driveway, we end up with damage, scratched walls, machines that will explode because the ribbon gets caught in a rock or a boulder in a divot and it takes a piece of equipment down. It just slows the whole process down. So, again, we will strive to do our best to train our employees to keep everybody safe, to prevent damage, but again, the use of labor from other departments as well as hiring new labor is going to be a challenge, and I think always will be a challenge for us here at Kirkwood. But I don't really have anything else to add about the labor portion. There are reasons why it happened, but we certainly can strive to do better, and we're currently actively looking for more snow removal labor to give us a hand. In fact, we have one homeowner this next week who lives in Kirkwood and is interested in plowing snow, and I'm very excited, and hopefully it will work out to hire him, because I think it'd be great to have a homeowner on our team who can understand the other side of the coin, but also assist us with our goal of getting and providing the best service possible. The next item I want to talk about is, and I definitely will open this up for questions at the end, so please save your comments, is equipment. We have, as you know, 6 trackless machines, 3 loaders. One is a 950 GC that we're currently leasing, and within that as part of that lease, we also purchased a 14-foot snow removal blade. The blade arrived late, and it was the wrong size. We worked with the vendor. We stopped payment, as you can see in the consent. We actually stopped payment on an invoice to Inky because the product wasn't delivered as promised. Because of this, it creates new challenges for our district snow removal staff, and the picture you see here is actually of the Sun Meadows area where there's only so much room that we can blow snow, so we are very dependent on blades in the commercial area to move the snow to a place where we can actually blow it into a snow ramp. When Hinky delivered the 12-foot blade, again, we complained, but we didn't want to be without a blade during the holiday season, so they allowed us to use the blade, and we did. We finally got the 12-foot blade replaced with this blade here in the photograph, which is the 14-foot blade, and after one storm cycle, it was discovered that the bolts on the very top of the blade that mount the blade to the assembly for the loader started to become loose. We tightened the bolts. Pretty soon, the bolts essentially stripped out. So again, we're scrambling to get Hinky back up here, try to fix the problem. They hired Holt from California to come up. They sent a technician up, couldn't solve the problem. Last Friday, they picked up the blade in the morning and returned the 12-foot blade back in the evening. So currently we're working with a 12-foot blade that we are using to do the job, but it's not ideal and we're not happy with it. So we'll be working to get some relief from Holt on the freight charges as well as trying to get this problem corrected. But this just illustrates one of the issues that we have with equipment. And we do expect to have equipment problems throughout the year. If you asked me yesterday morning how many tracklesses we had running, I would say one. But because of Tom, our new mechanic, and him physically going down to West Sacramento to pick up parts yesterday, we have 4 tracklesses running right now. And then late yesterday afternoon, we lost another trackless. We were able to switch parts out. And again, we're back to 4, but it's a constant battle to keep equipment running. And I'm pleased that we have a good relationship with local vendors as well as a new mechanic who spent 2 days in Sacramento learning all about how to replace a clutch on a trackless and working side by side with their mechanic to learn the machines better. So I do see good things on the horizon, especially with Tom, the new mechanic, but also with the ability to continue operating equipment as best as possible, but also being financially responsible. In years past, we've relied on others to come up and assist us and spent a lot of money for consultants to drive up here to work on machines. We're going to try to avoid that, but if the need is there and we have to get it done and have to hire somebody to come up, we will do it. So we ensure we have enough equipment out there to do the job. Moving on to routes. As you know, we changed our operation procedure this year. In years past, we essentially had a developed route that took numerous years to get to, and we essentially did the job, and then if a request came in, we stopped what we were doing and handled the request immediately. Staff looked at that operation and felt that it was not as beneficial, and it created some issues where we were moving equipment from one side of the valley to the other side and delaying the overall service that we provided. To address the bouncing around issues that we've seen in the past and try to be more efficient, we went to a route system this year, which was new for us. And essentially, we were starting from one end of a contract and going to the other end. By doing so, we created a problem where the people that were actually here weren't getting the service they needed as quickly. So out came a few complaints and comments from the public, which we appreciated. And through the operations committee, we've since modified our routes to address people that are here. And I think we've done a significant change, and Brandy, you can attest to this. You worked the last storm cycle and sent a lot of emails out saying, essentially, hey, if you're here, let us know. We will try to address you as soon as possible. We won't drive by your driveway to do the next route section. We will take care of you now. And since that change has happened, I think we've become actually more efficient, and we've definitely provided better customer service, and there's been a few positive comments from homeowners reflecting that as well, so we appreciate that. But as said in the Operations Committee, we are actively soliciting for suggestions and comments on how we can do our job better, and by modifying the routes, I think this is a step in the right direction. Moving on to sanding. As you know, historically, the district has purchased a sanding unit that can be installed in one of our pickup trucks. And in the past, we have sanded in some areas that are traditionally shady or covered in ice, especially after a busy storm cycle and people are driving on the road and the conditions warrant the need for sand. Unfortunately, due to the California Regional Water Control Board and the actions that they've taken with the resort, with the cinder issue that's, as you all are aware of, for the last few years, our use of sand on roads, according to Richard Moll, who's with the state, can be limited and a challenge, and it could put a responsibility on the district to come back and clean up the sand after a storm cycle. Sanding is not currently part of our snow removal contract. However, if we would like to offer the service next year, we're going to need to review and revise the contract and address the concerns the state has for the sand to run off into the waterways. I think in the staff report, it does a better job of explaining what I just did, but bottom line is we are very sensitive and not polluting the environment, and we will certainly work with the HOAs and the community to try to provide a service which I think is essential for safety, but also sensitive to the needs of the district and the meadow stream water quality. So my final thing I'd like to add is that we've, again, listened to the Operations Committee. We have suggestions of future operational considerations that we are currently improving on and implementing now, which is by adding a night shift. This is something that Patron has mentioned in the past, which is imperative on Fridays and Saturdays to have somebody here. In the event that the weather changes and it comes in heavier, we'll at least have somebody to open up the roads and get people into their homes. Working longer hours, these 12-hour days, which is really difficult on staff. Drew Mateer, who's our AV person in the back, can attest to it's really hard to get up at 3 o'clock, start work at 4, work a 12-hour day, and then expected to come back and be a functional employee the next day to do whatever else is needed. And when you do that during a storm cycle, after 2 or 3 days, emotions get high, tension gets high, people get wore out. And we have to give people days off. We have to be sensitive to people's personal needs. And so through the juggling of staff and the work of Brandy Benson and Dave Waddle, who just walked by, we're trying to accommodate everything, but again, provide the best service that we can. So we're focusing on hiring more seasonal staff and trying to nurture the seasonal staff that we're hiring now to come back next year. We actually hired somebody out of the parking lot this year. He was a former employee walking by to go meet somebody to go snowboarding, and after 5 minutes he became another seasonal operator. And it was great because Kyle McDougall, who's the person that Dave and I bumped into, was excited to do the work, but also he knows the routes and he's very efficient. So if I can nurture and get more people like Kyle McDougall to come back and help us out, we certainly will encourage that. And then finally, we've had to be very competitive with our wages. Like Caltrans, everybody's really challenged to find employees willing to do the work. And we've had to increase our minimum starting pay from $12 an hour to $16 an hour. It seems to help a little bit, but we are challenged with employee housing. Our current employee housing is full. I've reached out to Vail Resorts to see if I can use any of their existing employee housing to fill our need for seasonal employees, and they, according to Brian Bigley, they are full at this time as well. So that's something that we'll need to think about for the future, and I know it was discussed in planning yesterday about how do we increase quality employee housing for the Valley to, again, have that minimum core people here to do the job when the passes are closed. And then finally, something new this year, and as we've discussed in the past, is how we use the curation of data from GPS tracking through Fleet Tracker. We've had mixed results with Fleet Tracker. It's essentially a very good program for wide open roads and for some of the larger contracts. And sort of surprised to see when we brought our T4 back from Sacramento that Jessica and Kathy could track the machine on Highway 50 coming back to Kirkwood. So it definitely works. But for smaller landmarks, for the driveways that we identified, sometimes the GPS data does not get translated from Fleet Tracker, and so we're having to go back and auto-populate the contracts for the time spent and what machine was in the contract. And so I'd like to open it up for questions right now and comments from the board, but then I'd also like to have Bertrand come up. He has a presentation he'd like to share with the board and the community, and also discuss a little bit about his findings with the GPS tracking as well. So with that, I give it back to the board.
I have several questions,
Okay, but
comments. If that's
Eric,
okay.
we'll start with
So
you.
first, I still don't quite understand, absent the driveway, not giving some priority to occupied homes, forgetting about that for the moment, I don't quite understand how the routing is different this year versus previous years. Didn't plows always start in one place and go around and do roads? And for the roads, I guess I'm talking about.
So for the routing, yes, it's very similar as last year, but the starting point changed between storms. And the idea was that we wouldn't start at the same place every time, that the person at the end of the line would be first the next time we went out. And so that was the intent and the goal. And so we divided each contract. This is a larger contract, KMA, East Meadows, a little bit in the commercial. Commercial is a very unique area, and things have to be done a certain way to properly get it to the ramp without being counterproductive. But for East Meadows and the west side, the KMA areas, one day they would start on Dangler. The next storm they would start on Fremont and then work from A, B, C, D all the way around. And route sheets were developed by staff, and then any information that was on the route sheets, for example, recently on Sorrel Court, there's a home that had firewood delivery. Dropped in the driveway, snowed on top, took out 2 machines. How do you predict that? You can't. So we document that this occurrence happened, and we'd move on to the next thing. So those route sheets are in the machines, and those obviously change per storm cycle. It's more labor intensive administratively, and then afterwards curating the data and having to go back and manually input problems as well as time adjustments. It definitely takes time.
But I was just curious to know about the routing, how it's different for the roads, and you've explained that. And what I'm wondering is, of concerns and complaints that we've received, how much had to do, and the complaints that I received, the reason I brought this up at the last board meeting was I was receiving a lot of complaints. There was 2 things. One was ice on the roads. It wasn't that the roads weren't getting cleared of snow, it was just that they weren't being cleaned up and there was ice accumulating. And the second was driveways.
Sure.
So I didn't get any complaints about, our road wasn't plowed. It was the other things. I was just wondering if, in other words, if there are fixes to be had, I'm not sure, is routing, other than the driveways, is routing of the roads one of those things? Or is that something that's going to stay the same now?
We're still going to do a modified route. We're still going to kind of follow a pattern or a process to do this neuromobile. We won't drive by somebody who...
The driveway, yeah, no, I understand that that's changed, but it's just the roads. You're going to start at different points each storm cycle. Right. Okay.
And at the beginning of the season, quite frankly, Dave Waddle and Joe Cullen were so committed to the routes, they felt like they shouldn't go back and touch up a section of the road that needed it, that had pack on it. They're like, okay, well, I'm going to do the route. I'm going to do the route from A to B. But we, in late December, said, no, if there's an issue, if there's pack on the road or if there's a problem and you need to spend more time working on that, you should do that. You should make it safe. And so they did.
Good.
But, again, storm cycles, conditions, ice can develop, as we've seen throughout the valley, depending on time of day and everything else. And so going back over and over to try to reduce the pack is a delicate dance because you can't do it when it's cold. It's better to do it mid-afternoon.
I understand. Yeah. No, I understand that.
We found that typically we had to give staff time off when we should be out taking the pack off. Hopefully with the increase in staffing levels and more equipment to operate, we'll be able to do a better job with that.
Second question I have is, it was addressed in the report, but it's interesting to me. I mean, this has to do with base camp. I mean, I understand the base camp had a big problem. It had to be fixed. And I understand that we had a role to play in that, and we, find the fault, help them get a generator in place. But what surprised me once I found out was that we were actually doing the work. And so essentially, I think what we did, we said, we have a set of contracts called snow removal contracts, but we're going to put those slightly aside in favor of creating a new contract. And I'm not, this is a judgment call because of how essential is our service to that new contract versus getting an outside entity in to do the work. Now, what the report said is probably couldn't find that outside entity, and so Eric chose to go that route. But to me, that was part of the problem of all the complaints that we got, that I heard starting between Christmas and New Year's. And that's when the ice was accumulating on roads where it normally doesn't accumulate. So it's just something, I don't know how we address that, but if you have a set of contracts, you've got to honor those before you take on new contracts. If you don't have the resources to take on the new contract, should we do it? Then a couple smaller questions. One is, how is it that people are supposed to notify staff that they are at their homes?
So currently you can log in to your account and make a request for snow removal services. And through the work that Bob's been doing with the report server, Eric, and others, and Brandy, we're trying to make it a more user-friendly approach for making snow removal requests. That you can, in the ideal world, you make a request, the machine shows up in your driveway, it removes the snow, you get a notification back that it's been done, and you're a happy camper. The reality is, you make a request, it may or may not come back as a completed activity, and we have to manually input the completion on there. We also talked about when the request should be made. We'd like to have it within 24 hours in advance so we can prepare and be ready for you. But we're working out the finer details on how those requests are made and notifications made. In fact, we were going to talk about it today about how to do it, but there's still some refinement we want to do to it before we launch it formally. So in the meantime, as we've done all week, if a homeowner would like to make a request through online through their account, please do so. Or if you'd like to call the district during working hours, we'd be more than happy to write down your requests. And we keep and maintain a running log on these requests. In fact, we just got one today, and we'll try to provide the service as soon as possible, or let you know it's been done.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I figured that you guys were working on the website, because right now the way it's set up is, I went in this morning, because I said, okay, I think I'll just let people know that we're here through Sunday, that we're hoping to leave sometime early Monday morning. But I couldn't say that. I couldn't do that because the dates, I mean, the pull down on dates was only today and tomorrow. versus later on. I guess you could do it in the comment box or something like that. But I just wasn't sure how that was done, and I'm not sure if it's been communicated to people how to do that in the interim.
Eric, before you leave this subject, as you're having this discussion, how do renters utilize this too? I mean, certainly a renter can call the office, but just how does that work with?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And then if you look at the KMA contract, the only people that can actually make a special request for parking pads is the representative from the HOA. So there are little things that we have to tweak to try to make it as user-friendly as possible, and then making sure we reach out to the different HOAs, the property managers. Kirkwood Lodging, which is a big one. That just happened the other day with Timber Ridge. Guests needed something, but they weren't sure what channel, who to call. We handled it. It was luckily during office hours, but after hours, 10 o'clock, you're rolling in. How do you get the service? So,
Jeff, to answer your question, is any renter, if the owner gives them permission, can access the account and make requests. So that's always existed.
Well, sure, you could give off your information to a renter. You wouldn't know we wouldn't know who's into our account.
No, the renter the renter logs in, is assigned temporary access to the account, and can look at things just like the homeowner.
Okay, wasn't aware of that.
And my last question is just, I guess we've got 4 out of 6 trackless operating now. How are the other 2 trackless just down for short periods, or are they out for the count, or what's the deal?
One is a PTO shaft that we used the last one on the shelf, and then we used it again within 8 hours. So we are picking up parts on Monday. So it's just parts. And for example, a window fell out of a trackless yesterday. Just never happened before. It fell out and broke. So how do you anticipate that? So things like that happen, and so we try to get them fixed as quickly as possible. It's the catastrophic clutch transfer case, ribbon shafts that twist, things that we can't anticipate. That's the challenge. And then if the shop in Sacramento doesn't have the parts, they're coming from Canada. So in years past, we've had machines down all season long because we just couldn't get the parts, or we stole some of the parts off of it. We couldn't resurrect. And
my last comment is just that I took the snowfall data that we have on our website, and I found this table of staff and equipment by day very useful. That's in the report. And what I was just trying to see, because I'm correlating with when I was getting complaints or hearing of complaints, and it seems that compliments started coming in when we had between 6 and 9 staff doing the work, and we had at least 7 machines operating. So less than that, complaints. At that level, compliments. Now, I think some of those people were also working those 12-hour shifts, so you probably want to be at the higher end of that staff. And then finally, I just checked, and the assumptions in our budget was that we would have 5 seasonal operators starting in November.
correct.
And we've never, I think the maximum we've had is 4, right? And typically it's been 1 or 2.
It's, like I was mentioning before, it's been a challenge, and we had set up interviews, for example, last week. They got canceled because the roads are closed, and then the roads opened up, weather was good. I had an interview at 10 a.m. At 10:15, no show. I said, hey, Kim, can you call this person, see if they're coming up? Is there a problem? And the comment came back. She did get a hold of the person, and the person came back and said, well, something came up and I couldn't make it. So that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I know.
So,
Yeah.
but
Thanks.
thank you.
Any other board members have any questions?
How long do you have?
Well, we're here all morning. I have a couple. When do we expect delivery on the 14-foot blade? I mean, is there any expectation, or?
I have no delivery date yet.
And this use of sand, I'm constantly amazed at how we're held to a higher requirement than Caltrans or anyone else around, who seem to be able to use sand at will, which is disappointing. Because it does create a huge problem for us.
It's kind of due to the grindings, you know.
Well, I know, but I mean,
And they're still up, their grindings are still
I
out
know.
there.
We'll pay the price for that for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's really,
Yeah, it's not so much a question as a statement.
yeah. And I mean, the sand, for the sand to get in the meadow, it's got to go through the grindings. So, you know, I think they're being a little unrealistic, but it was a pretty bad environmental mess. So now we're paying, in addition to Vail paying.
Any other comments? We'll open up to the
I
audience.
have a few. Rick, what have we added in terms of staff? In other words, the newsletter said we had hired 2 new snow removal operators. Is that what we've added?
That is correct. We've actually added 3 operators, new operators.
Okay.
And we're actually interviewing 2 more next week. Kyle McDougall, who I mentioned before, is a seasonal guy. He's part-time, so I think we can actually bring him on and be the 6th seasonal person, and possibly a 7th seasonal celebrity type person if we need it. Sensitive to the budget, as you illustrated before as well. I think we've got the money in there to do it.
Peter, how long have we been providing snow removal services? When did we start?
I think we asked that question, was it Randy, wasn't it 2005?
It was 2003. Well, before then we had purchased 1 trackless and the backhoe, and we did the district facilities and ran out of this building. Since that time, we've got 6 trackless machines. The last one being purchased in 2006. Is that right? No, 2016. At a cost of $122,000 and change.
So I guess my point starting out is, you know, we've provided snow removal services successfully for...
So 2003 is what it said in the history slide.
2003?
Yeah.
for 16, years. And on a personal basis, I have known, not well, but Dave Waddle and Joe Pellerin for a long time, and nobody knows. I have great respect for their knowledge of snow removal at Kirkwood. So we've been doing it for a while. We have the talent, right? And there's a method to my madness here. I'm glad to see you've hired some people. So when we had our October snow removal meeting, there were 2 follow-up action items that I asked for, and I'm curious if we've made any progress on them because I haven't heard any reports. One is, the physical GPS hardware. You alluded to it. If it doesn't give you good data, there's no amount of software manipulation or curation that's going to solve that. We asked Eric and staff to look into how to resolve that because that should be a very solvable problem. The second thing we asked at that meeting, I asked, is we're not the only people doing GPS tracking, and I don't want to hijack the GPS tracking topic, but staff was supposed to go around to other places like Tahoe Daughter and other places that use GPS data and see what they did. Has there been any progress on that?
Very little. We did hire. We did look into other agencies, and some of the other agencies use a similar program as Fleet Tracker. Their contracts are differently. They, for example, the one in North Truckee, they have a large. They do driveways, but they're just more interested in where the machine is within the association, not necessarily what they've done each driveway. And they're using a different type of equipment that we actually had a consultant come up from Reno, Sierra Electronics, to look at our existing equipment and see if we can modify and use a new technology where the radio itself creates a breadcrumb and it sends back to a signal, a central station, a signal essentially saying where the machine is versus a GPS signal. That would require installing brand new radios on every piece of equipment as well as buying the software. And I never got the bid back from CO Electronics, but it sounded like it was going to be a pretty hefty price tag for essentially the same kind of technology or service it could provide. But other than that, we haven't found anything new and exciting that would benefit us, but we can certainly continue to try to explore it and maybe bring back a staff report if you'd like.
Yeah, so that's where I'm going. You started out the response by saying very little, and that's my concern. I guess the third component of it, the first being GPS hardware, the second being what other people have done, is I know in talking with other board members, you know, the attention applied to our data has been intermittent over the last year. I mean, there was some stuff early in the summer, then there was a rush for the October meeting. And my concern, you know, we're, as a board, are supposed to establish policy. I think the policy is that snow removal is not getting enough senior management, senior staff attention. And so what I'd like to throw out there, not to decide today, because we need our general manager here, is maybe two different management structure possibilities. One is to have a snow removal subcommittee or committee, ad hoc committee, I guess, maybe replace some of the ad hoc committees that we don't need anymore, to focus on this on a monthly or 45-day basis between now and next October to make sure we have all of our ducks in line by October 1st or thereabouts next year. Because I just think this needs, at a policy level, it needs more attention. It hasn't gotten the attention that it needs, and you know that because you were in the operations committee meeting. And the second one that I'd like to throw out is if staff seems more focused on other utilities, whether we should have a manager of snow removal services that frankly reports to the board and who we can look at and hold accountable on a monthly basis. And again, I don't think these need to be decided today, but I think we need to have the discussion about more focus on a service we've successfully provided for 16 years and have fallen down on in the last 2 years, and where we haven't lost our snow removal leadership. So I'd like to see more follow-up on things we discussed 5 months ago, like GPS hardware and what other people are doing, and it needs to happen on a more frequent basis.
I understand. And I'll express this to the general manager.
What I'm wondering on the GPS thing. It seems to me that because what we have is doing fine in the larger areas, right? In the HOAs, basically. Where it's not doing well is in the driveways, and I think maybe some problems with two small HOAs that are immediately adjacent to each other. So it seems to me that the reason we would want GPS to be fine-tuned so that it's accurate for driveways is, one, so we can manage the costs or inform people of the cost of the driveways more accurately. But secondly is the service of being able to notify when a driveway is done, which that second one is a very nice thing. I don't know that it's essential. It's a very nice service. I guess I'm just making a point is I hope we don't charge by driveway anymore. That's what I'm hoping. I think we charge HOAs, let HOAs deal with it.
Well, Judy sent us an email, which if it comes to fruition, we promise him.
Yeah. So that. But I do think the other service is a very nice service. The other aspect of it, it's a very nice service.
Okay. Any other comments from the board here? Standish? Any more questions?
So just one observation in terms of the driveways. You said there were 65 contracts, 22.
I think it's 85, isn't it?
85 driveways. So that administration's for the most part done by the KMPUD on the basis of some GPS information that may or may not be
There's
correct.
67 driveway contracts.
Actually, we're doing 65, we lost 2.
Okay, so 65. Okay, so point of it being that administration's been done by the KMPUD with concerns for individual HOAs about whether that data is correct or whether we feel that there's improvements on the data. And just moving all of those 65 contracts into an HOA contract disguises what might still be an issue that would come back to individual HOAs. How much of this is my driveway? So how would an HOA be able to do it if we're 2 parts removed? So just an observation about moving the administrative burden from KMPUD. Currently, for the most part, I understand that the East Meadows is not the same way. And whether that makes any sense for some of these broader issues about am I getting value for money for my contract? Thank you.
If there's no more comments from the board, I'll open it up to the audience. Bertram?
Well, there's one. Thank you for hiring the 3 people. I mean, I think GPS aside, it gets down to labor and equipment, right?
Yes.
And thank you for hiring 3 people. I think that's responsiveness on the district staff and management department.
It sounds like we're very fortunate to get the mechanic we got, too. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that.
I mean, regardless of any strategy, if you don't have employees and equipment, you're going to be challenged.
We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So moved.
Okay. Bertram?
I'd like to make a comment on the website notification. I think in the past it was more geared toward an on-demand system, so I'm going to leave at 10 p.m. or 8 a.m. or whatever. And the district was scrambling to try to match this demand and having equipment going across the valley. That was very inefficient, and it was ideal. A road is coming in. And there was a lot of flake because we got ice, but I don't think the road are responsible for that. What's responsible for that is a lack of staff and equipment, meaning they didn't have the staff to basically do the cleanup. And typically, that in the previous year, they were doing, KMPUD was doing snow removal during the storm, but after the storm, they were coming up to clean up both everything, road, driveways, and parking pad. And that ice was not, the material for ice was not anymore there. This year, we don't have as much cleanup that we used to. Maybe because they wanted to stick to the route, but I'm glad that you mentioned, that you explained to the staff that, yes, you do the route, but if there's a problem, you have to come back to specific issues. So I think the route, actually, in my opinion, are a good thing. They are not responsible of the ice, or it's just because the material was not removed. It has nothing to do with the route. And back to the website, I think there should be more a notification to KMPUD that people are going to be there a specific weekend, rather than an on-demand system, which I think is just unrealistic. I agree.
Jeff, just going to say I haven't received any emails from anybody else.
Okay. I did ask Bertrand to analyze the data. I'd love to have him have time to present his findings.
Yep.
Sure.
Can we do that?
I think we've completed all our questioning, so go ahead, Bertram.
Do you have a slide for the...
Of course. Would you like to come up?
So as Bob said, I was asked to see if I could, there was clearly a sense that there was missing landmarks for the driveways, and we actually, so basically I was asked if I could look statistically what we could see from the data we had. So I got data all the way to the end of I put 2108. I'm sorry, my report is 2018. And so it's important to notice there is no big storm. I mean, the biggest one is December. We go to 15-inch. And the reason it's important is because most of these small storms are usually handled by just one pass. You don't have to come back multiple times. I don't know for that December 2nd if there was multiple pass or not, but it's just 1 out of 12, so it doesn't have too much of an impact. And so no, that is indeed coming from the website. That's quite handy. So the way to approach that analysis was to try to see how often each driveway was getting basically a signal, a GPS tracking. And so I got 859 snow plowing events, and there was 117 driveways because that includes the East Meadow driveways. And so that makes an average of 7.3 events. So here we have about 12, 13 storms. I'll remove one which actually KMPUD did not mobilize on. That's November 28th. So we had, right there, it looked like it's underreporting. The standard deviation is 3.4, which is pretty high. I mean, that's almost 50% of actually the average. And that's also an indication that we don't have a good reporting. So I would expect a few discrepancies because I could see that sometimes the PUD is coming back. I mean, it has to stop, no more gas, it is going away, coming back. So there is a few discrepancies you would expect. But based on this number of storms, I would expect that most driveways being visited 10 to 12 times during that period, not 7. And so what I did is I binned all the driveway with the same number of events together. And so when I did that, and that's going to the next slide, it shows that driveways have this kind of distribution. That means, so what I'm showing here is how many driveways have been visited once, twice, 3 times, or 10 times, and 19 times. That's the variability we got. Instead of something basically around 10 and 12, we got from 1 to 19. Actually, I think the 1 should not be here. I could not kick it out because I was doing the analysis blind, and I believe that one is just a new contract. This one might be accurate, actually. There was a new contract on Fremont, and so but as I say, I had the data blind, so I could not make sure this was the one, so I left it. But basically, you still see an amazing distribution that driveways can get anything except from 2 to 19 events instead of the 20 and 12 expected. And what happened is, so when you miss a landmark, it's basically either the HOA is still being charged for that driveway, or that time could be actually passed to the previous driveway. I mean, and that's probably why some people get more like that. So now on the underreporting stage. So if you expect 10 to 12, so I've considered that anything below 9 was underreported. So by computing how many, so that means the driveway with only 2 is probably having 7 missing events at the minimum. I was being conservative. So if I compute that, basically I have 465 missing events being conservative, and that represents a third of all the events. It is probably higher than that. So clearly here, what we see is we basically have a high level of missed landmark for the driveways. So the problem with that, it does impact HOA time. That means, I'm talking for KMA now, is if you miss the driveway, the HOA is going to be between, quote, billed, at least tracked for that specific driveway. So the next slide. So here, before I was only looking at how many times the KMPUD show up on a specific driveway, and I was expecting to have a nice bell curve, pretty narrow. So now here I have actually combined the time span on each driveway. And I've also been here 0 to that, it's time of bin time, so 1-4 mean any driveway which has between 1 and 4 minutes. So it's actually 5 because it's 4:59, and then 5, 9 minutes, and so on. So here, actually, you can see that you have actually a better clustering of the driveway together, which is kind of nonsensical because you would expect, since driveways are different, that you have less homogeneity. So, let's see here. So basically, these two histograms really underline the fact that currently we have a major issue on tracking small landmarks, small polygons. And it does unfortunately impact everything. It actually contaminate the quality of the reporting for HOAs because of that, because they are actually impacted. So the last thing I would like to say, so for me, to try to correct that is going to be impossible. First, you not only you would have to look at all the HOA data and the driveway data, and it's a lot of work. I don't know if you start playing with it. It gets quickly overwhelming. And the fact is, if you don't have the landmark, you don't know when the time shifts need to be done. So how can you fix that? So anyway, the magnitude of the work involved to curate that would make basically, automatically, we would create even more errors by trying to fix it. So I don't think the current GPS tracking system has the accuracy to do the small polygons, the driveways. Even the small HOAs, like Unit 3, could be a problem. It's almost a driveway. And there's two reasons for me. Currently, the system doesn't have the accuracy. It's not, the Valley has its problem, but I think the system is not performing as good as it should based on most GPS available today. And the second reason is the scan time of this provider is just too broad. It just gives you every minute, unless you change direction. It should be every 2 seconds, every second. And if you had that, maybe you could actually handle it. So that's, to me, there's two technical issues that prevent you doing the small landmarks. So if you have questions, I may have, I can explain further. Yeah.
First, I want to thank you because I really wanted an independent look at the data, and you reached the almost identical conclusions that I did. So I appreciate that very much.
Why is that distribution so narrow? Do you know?
For the time?
Yeah.
Why is it so narrow? The binning has an effect. You can see if I had done the binning by minutes, it would be different. Since I had so many, I thought I basically did binning by 5 minutes. And the fact is, it's only 13 storms. Most driveways are done in less than a minute, so they're all basically, they're just falling there. It's basically, just keep in mind the binning has an effect on how this is showing up. But the fact is, it's most of the driveway now are between 5 minutes and 20 minutes. And which sounds to me reasonable based on
I think your conclusion is very logical. It makes sense to me.
So that brings the idea of pushing back the driveway to the HOA. If we do that, then you solve the problem because you only report HOAs. You still have the small HOAs, but if you have a few small HOAs, you can curate them because you know how much time you're supposed to spend in a small, medium, and large storm, so it's doable. But having to deal with 22 plus 65 curation, that becomes a huge task. And again, not perfect.
Let me reinforce that a little bit. So we wrote displays, so for any route activity, it would show you what was expected and what's missing. So it'd show you the difference between the two. So somebody could look at that who had been on the route and could say, well, this is what was missed and make a change. So for the HOAs, you can say, well, if 3 of them were missed and their average amount should have been this, you look and it shows you which ones are higher, which ones are lower. And for example, like with Unit 3, that boundary wasn't right, so that was an adjustment that fixed it. It mostly comes down to the Sun Meadows 1, 2, 3, and 4. 3 and 4 have the same contract because they're right next to each other. So you don't actually leave one. There's no time to actually leave. You just go back and forth between them. So those are a little bit funky, but the general experience is that you can get pretty close to making sure that all the HOAs are done. By contrast, the same chart for a route for a driveway would say, all right, well, I'll just do Glove Rock as an example. 2 driveways were done and the other 9 weren't. So how do you want to reallocate the time? So you could do it statistically, but only if it's missed a relatively small amount of time. If it's missed my estimate was 50 to 70% of the time are missing, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it that's any more rational than where we are.
With the current set of technology.
With the data that we have available to do it.
So it's at this stage it's beyond fixable. That's my summary in 2 words.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in total sync on this.
Any other comments?
I guess my only other one is, I would favor
Trying to fix as opposed to abandon the GPS system. I think that, when we had our October snow removal meeting, I followed you around to your driveway, and, my handheld Garmin GPS showed plus or minus 3 to 5 feet throughout the valley, and I'd prefer to try and fix it as opposed to abandon it. Because I think it's fixable.
Is it worth the effort? The time, labor?
I think some basic follow-up research on what other people are doing is worthwhile, and I don't think it should take a lot of time.
I'm more optimistic than I am, but I've had a lot of deliveries. Drivers tell me that I live somewhere else. Getting pellets delivered, getting FedEx deliveries and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My GPS showed that you're down the street half a mile away. I don't know. Maybe I might be being cynical, but
Well, my brief 30,000 foot answer to your question really should be explored a little bit more, and I'd like to know what Mammoth is doing and others. I only have one place that I found that did it, but we can certainly.
Which is where?
It's a North Truckee, and they have a lot of different contracts, but I've got limited information, so we can certainly explore that.
Is that Tahoe Dollar PUD?
I think no, it's a private. Yeah, I don't have the info in front of me.
There's a private snow removal company that removes North Truckee area.
That said, just want the district board community to know that we are committed to solve this, do the best that we can, and we welcome any suggestions or comments from anyone. Please email me, Eric, and we'll continue to push forward to get this back to where it needs to be.
Thank you.
Well, I really support Sandra's idea of creating a snow removal ad hoc committee to focus on this for the next 10 months or so, 9 or 10 months. My own perspective is that until we have the GPS fixed for the driveways, we shouldn't have individual driveway contracts. It's just too hard. Administratively, it's too hard. The data isn't right. That's just what I think, and I just see what happens with East Meadows, and there are no issues around this. Which is not to say that East Meadows is being fair to its own homeowners, because I don't think they are. But in terms of everybody gets charged the same thing, no matter if you got a driveway or not. But I really don't care if my driveway and the next door driveway is different in size, but we're getting charged basically the same thing. I don't care. nobody, I've never heard anybody say that they really do care about that. So,
I'd like to mention something here. I mean, based on the number, I think the labor is only 17% of the cost of snow removal. So the time you spend on driveway is only impacting 70% of the cost of doing the job. So why bothering with any of that and just go with a flat fee? You have a driveway, you want a service, this is what it is.
well, that's kind of, yeah, and that's the way it's always been done in East Meadow.
Yeah.
I mean, Dale Rise used to charge, we would add a house, and he would add $1,000 to the contract, and that was just the way it
Only
was.
17%. Yeah.
So, but I do think the value of the GPS exploration that you're going to do and seeing if we can get a more accurate thing for driveways is the notification. I mean, it's a very nice service. And, you know, if that can be done at reasonable cost and not for, you know, come do my driveway right now, but just say, oh, your driveway's been done. I mean, to me, when that was happening, when I was looking at that, it was a very nice, and getting an email or a text message, it was a very, very nice feature. So if we can get it accurate enough to do that well, that's great. That would be great.
All right, so let me add a couple of comments if I can here. So I agree that the value of the notification improves customer satisfaction, which was my original reason for wanting to do it. So there's in the interim, I believe it's possible to get better GPS service than the crap we're currently getting, and that's kind of the summary of the crap, which is what Fleet Track produces, and you never know when it's going to be right or wrong. So it's just not a very good service, and I'm willing to bet that there are better services out there. And you know, every indication I have with my own cell phone, which is how I was originally going to do this, just put a cell phone in each one and ping it every 10 seconds or whatever. But in terms of providing the homeowner with notification, I think what we can do instead is an expected thing. If every other home in your route has been done and the equipment has left the route, we could say that. We could send a message and say, we don't have it, you know, we don't know that. It basically says we don't know that we're in your driveway, but we probably were. I mean, it's better than.
So that's like quantum mechanics.
That's right. You take the probabilistic theory of this electron being, and you have the uncertainty principle, and you could say reasonably that it was probably serviced, right? But we don't know for sure. That's probably better than saying we don't know anything. So that's one way we can address it until we have better service. We sent letters to the 3 HOAs asking whether they would be interested or willing to consider this. We heard back from KMA, but did we hear back from the other two?
Not yet.
So forcing them to say, well, we have this problem, we'd like to pass it on to you, I don't necessarily think is appropriate. I would much rather just say, we're going to a flat rate per driveway. Or maybe there's small, medium, and large. Do something like that, and just say that's what we're doing. If it's unfair, I'm sorry, but we don't have any better way of doing it. And that way, it's only a question of who does the billing. And the HOAs all have their deadlines. They have a July 1st fiscal year. So unless we're going to tell them exactly what's going to happen by beginning of March, they don't have time to react and go out and do all the other things. So what we're really talking about is we have to decide at the next board meeting what we're doing, what we're going to tell the HOAs for the next fiscal year. So you can study it and you can make progress into the future, but the deadline is pretty much now.
But we do have good data by HOA,
Absolutely.
including driveways.
Yes, I believe
And that's
true.
data that we have confidence in.
Yes.
I'd like to add another point to the thinking of this driveway issue. So all I was showing is we miss driveway, okay. But the other issue is sometimes you are, because you don't use necessarily the same equipment for road or driveway and things like that. So basically, often you see a split blower that goes from driveways to driveways. And when it does that, it actually charges HOA for every single between driveways. And that's a problem because, I say it again, so...
Well, why is it a problem? They're doing the road.
No, they are not, actually. As I said, on Fremont, they're doing it with a big engine, and then they come back with a small engine doing the driveways. So that's a problem I'm talking about. So if we move the driveways to HOAs, that's gone. This problem of misbilling time between driveways to HOAs would disappear.
Actually, Bertrand, they actually do use the tracklesses to clean up the roads. They employ big loaders and small loaders, in my experience.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not what I see. I see the guy going from driveways to driveways, not removing anything because...
No, they try to... Actually, in my experience, that's incorrect. I mean, I agree you don't want to pay somebody to go back and forth across the valley, especially on a Saturday when there's a lot of traffic.
That's a different issue. Yeah.
But they utilize all the blowers, big and small, to remove the berms. The blade makes a berm, and the blowers push the berm up in the banks. And they use both the tracklesses and the RPM.
Like as I said, check mostly my road, and my road is actually done by big engine, and then they come with a small engine just doing the driveways.
Well, I disagree.
Well, we could save this for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Sure.
So actually, my next point is yes, we should. I think time is of essence here because fiscal year is July 1st, and we need to have our budget done by May, and so we need to get going. And the best way would be probably to create quickly an ad hoc committee on snow removal, so we can actually. It's solvable. It just needs to be done. Yeah.
So then, what we'll do then is have on the agenda next meeting is the issue of how we'll structure the contracts for next year, and formation of a committee, a snow removal committee.
One of the things I was thinking of on that, it could be a subcommittee of the operations.
Well, ad hoc committee. I mean, it's...
Well, it wouldn't even have to be ad hoc. It could just be a subcommittee of the operations committee.
Get some volunteers, I guess.
Yeah, and you know, so they're... I mean, it's a year-round thing. They just wouldn't have anything to do in the summer or the whatnot, but the...
My view actually is that it would have something to do in the summer. I think this GPS thing is solvable, for one. Two, what I'm sort of challenging staff to do is have in place the labor and equipment by October 1st. And, you know, if we have to go from workers that we're not paying enough to or who we can cancel, you know, because if it doesn't snow, I think it's up to staff and this ad hoc committee to come up with a structure where we have the people in place. And as Bertrand said, labor is not a large component of our snow removal costs. And of all the complaints that I've received, you know, everybody wants the lowest price contract they can get, but that's second to I want the snow removed. Okay, you know, and I want it removed reliably. So I think that a lot of the work has to happen over the summer, because when you get into February, the fact that they were able to hire 3 people is heroic.
Yeah, what you do during the summer determines your...
Absolutely, it's all about preparation, being ready.
Totally.
I have one more question. We talked at the beginning of the year about timing, you know, with a stopwatch or something. Is that happening?
No.
The suggestion was that we just put on a video, and there's a video on there, and then it records the time, and then we take the video out, and that's a way of confirming the exact times. And that's been done several times.
Okay. So will we have time data at the next meeting or not?
Well, it confirmed that for HOAs, the accuracy of the fleet track data is reasonably close.
Okay. For HOAs.
That's what I was
That's
told.
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And this was important because, for example, the 950 GC does not have a device in it that we could use with fleet tracker.
So with that, here's what we have. March, next meeting will be, on the agenda will be the mechanism, the contracts, how we propose to proceed for the next year so the different associations can start preparing their budgets. And I think I would move that we do appoint a subcommittee for the operations committee and invite resident participation in that, and to get
I'll
that.
put that on the agenda for our committee meeting, and then we'll see who wants to volunteer from the committee. I think we
Okay.
have enough people that'd be interested in that.
Yeah. And I think even putting it out to the general public, I mean, not just the committee, in advance of the your committee meeting, but put that out that we're looking at forming a subcommittee of the operations committee strictly for snow removal.
Yeah, Jeff, I guess I would offer a different opinion, which is that I think the committee ought to report to the full board, meaning it's a hot enough topic, and if we have a subcommittee of the operations committee, I think Bertrand probably ought to be on. He's not on the operations committee, so.
But he could be on the subcommittee if he chooses to be on that. I mean, we have a structure, and I would rather deal with the structure. We have a general manager and the staff, and there's a reporting process, and I don't think it's, I think these are solvable problems, and the board will get information as it needs to get information on it. But,
My opinion is that it should be a high enough priority that it should be focused on, monthly for the next 8 months, which is October 1st, to get these problems solved. But, we can have that discussion at the next meeting. I'm not sure what everybody else thinks. The other thing I think we need to have at the next meeting is, and I talked to Eric Christensen about this after the operations committee, is just a discussion about whether snow removal is an equal priority with electricity, propane, water, and wastewater, or subordinate. And I didn't think it was appropriate to have here because Eric Christensen is not here. But I will read Judy Flynn's email, which is her opinion. Snow removal is just as important as propane, water, wastewater, and electricity. KMPUD has no market for these utilities if homeowners/renters cannot have good access to their homes. So that's something I'd request we put on the agenda for the March meeting, is whether snow removal is a equal priority or lesser priority.
Hardship versus inconvenience. I mean, in the 40 years I've been here, I've had to do without everything from water to electricity to propane to snow removal. You can't live very long up here without water. You can get by with if you have a shovel and a pair of snowshoes.
well, we can have this
I
discussion
know.
at the
I
next
just
meeting.
thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah. Okay, anything else on the snow removal?
I would like to affirm my participation to that ad hoc snow removal as a community member.
I was counting on that.
Thank you.
Very good. We'll close out this discussion and we'll move on to the ops report, operations report. Rick?
Yes, so as you know, we've been a little busy this winter. One of the projects that we took on is the replacement of the service line for the Meadow building at base camp. The next several pictures are the progress of the project itself. This was extremely a challenge for staff doing ditch work in the middle of winter, and probably one of the most complicated areas of Kirkwood with utilities, all utilities terminating essentially in the same location. I do have to commend staff for their dedication to continue on jackhammering through frozen tundra soil, finding locations of utilities that were never marked or were abandoned from years ago. We were able to complete the project and pull the new cable last Thursday, where we essentially rented a tugger, and with the staff of 9 people feeding the cable into the line, the new conduit for the building, we were able to make the proper connections and disconnect the temporary generator, which has since been removed as of yesterday afternoon from in front of the building. So again, compliments to staff taking on a ground fault project like this. This is the only ground fault project we've ever completed in this magnitude, as long as I've been with the district. In the past, we've hired others to do it at an extreme cost, and I think we've provided an excellent service for the base camp homeowners who currently have power due to this. I can't give the board an actual recap of the expenses. Those are being calculated now, but essentially these expenses will be passed on to the base camp HOA. Unless there's any other questions about this project, I will move on to our next.
I think it's important to point out that by doing this in-house, we took very careful precautions not to hit any other lines. That there were all kinds of other lines in that area, and when you subcontract some of this out, I'm not sure that they have the same motivation not to hit any lines that the district does. I know that there was some controversy over us doing it in-house, but I'm sure those people in base camp appreciated us completing the project in a timely manner.
I think that what you just said is probably one of the major reasons why it was a good idea. I mean, because of the complexity of the utilities in the ground.
It did, it took away from some of our other issues, and it fatigued the staff, obviously. Yeah. But I think it was the right call.
Moving on. Having been in operations for some time, I feel that we can handle any one emergency that comes up and any of the services that we provide quite well and adapt and overcome. This year's been unique. We not only have been, challenges with snow removal, we had a ground fault. We have a piece of equipment in our wastewater treatment plant called a high core machine, which is the machine that actually prevents the heavy debris from getting into the wastewater treatment plant. And that's a nice way of saying that it catches all the stuff that you shouldn't put down your toilet. It's been in service for some time, and we've been doing preventative maintenance on the machine, but essentially it failed. Luckily, when the plant was resurrected and rebuilt, they maintained the old bar screen system, which is this picture here, and essentially the water comes in from the community, cascades down this screen, and collects that debris into a bin. It's labor intensive, it's nasty, it clogs the drain in the building, which causes the building to clog. So this is the second emergency that we dealt with all at the same time. As I mentioned before, we're in the process of repairing this machine. I expect the cost to come in between $15,000 and $18,000. But it just illustrates the needs for more attention to be paid at the wastewater treatment plant, and I think we saw that clearly in the feasibility report that was provided previously. I
think it's important to point out that the bar screen isn't as effective in protecting the longevity of the membranes as the high core, and that's our major investment at the wastewater treatment plant, is that $500,000 or so that we have to come up with every 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, excellent point, Peter. Thank you for mentioning that. Further in the wastewater treatment plant, we still are struggling with our centrifuge machine. It is back online. However, we're using a house fan pointed at a VFD to keep it from overheating. We've asked for the replacement of the VFD, and as I mentioned before, we're working with Tesco to get that done. But it's just, again, continuing challenges in the treatment plant. But we're doing a good job of processing and continuing on. For propane, this is a picture of Steve Neff, our supervisor out there on Tuesday afternoon after the storm, and he and I attempted to dig out the mandatory valves that we have to use to fill the tanks, which are not quite leveling, equalizing the way we would like them to. We're having to manually transfer loads into different tanks to keep them level. Again, this is not a pleasant task to dig, but it's something that we have to do to maintain the system. Further, for propane, the vaporizer on the left, right, the green one. As you know, we've reported in the past that we had issues with the vaporizer on the left, the blue one, where the mechanics, the motor of it basically seized, and we had to basically go back, repair it, call outside help to do it. Now the one on the right has failed. So again, we're able to provide propane with this system as well as a backup system if we need it. But it's a unique challenge that we didn't anticipate, and we're dealing with all at the same time, along with the T1 line that luckily has been repaired as well. Another note for propane, and something that came out in the community newsletter, is that we'd like to remind the community and the board, of course, that the propane meters still need to be dug out, especially under these extreme adverse conditions, to ensure that the vents are clear and the meters do, the regulators do their job. So just a reminder on that. And staff will be going out hopefully next week, if not sooner, for a propane patrol. And I'm looking at Brandy. She's
I'm not sure if I'll help us after.
okay. It's on our list. And then finally, thanks to Jessica, she's been maintaining photos of the driveway here for the last several years. This is a picture that's also in the newsletter. Actually, it goes back to 2016 in the newsletter of kind of the current conditions. But clearly a bump this year in snow levels, and we expect to get more in the next week or two. So we'll do our best to get it out of everybody's driveway and continue to operate it.
Too bad that date wasn't a couple days ahead, because that pile was gotten quite a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Things have changed. But that concludes my operations report, unless there's any questions from the board.
So with that 2019,
Is that like an average year, a big year?
I think it's average.
That's what I would say,
Yeah, before this storm, we were at 267 inches.
which is about average, right?
Yeah, you think a little over halfway in 500.
It was after the storm we reached 267. We were at 175.
Oh, well, through the 5th through
I believe
through
that
the
sheet.
6th, we're at 260.
Where are you looking, Bertrand?
KMPUD is at, we have 302 for now, and the average is 265, so we're slightly above.
Where are you looking? Oh,
All the resort, yeah.
The resort measures their snow. They moved their snow measurement, so they're almost 1,000 feet above where we're measuring. So they've moved their thing closer to the top of Cherry.
Yeah. Actually, we are on the verge to become a power range.
Okay. Standing committee reports. Eric, anything to report on?
We had a really good meeting on Friday. We had several good discussions. One is Bob presented a possible alternative to approaching how we might fund employee housing, taking advantage of the new tax law, which created opportunity zones, of which we fall into one of those opportunity zones. The outcome of that was a lot of discussion, particularly with Gary Dirk and Nate Whaley present. And I think there will be further discussions. We're trying to get a meeting with Tom Fortune and Brian and Paul, their finance guy, to go over these kinds of things, to see if there's
see if there's interest. But was there a conclusion on that? I mean, there was a lot of interest, a lot of discussion about it, but I'm not sure there was a conclusion.
Well, I think there's two paths. One path is to look at, saying, a privately financed building suitable for employee housing that we would enter into a long-term lease, with or without the tax advantage. And the requirement there is to go back and figure out what the demand actually is, the full-time demand, since the resort has a lot of part-time. That led to a broader discussion of kind of a master plan for Loop Road. Take out Renwick, build a larger building that does multiple purposes, do that as part of one of these plans. So that's kind of a bigger topic, where we're just one of the renters within the building. Then you replace the building with something better. So the notion of doing a master plan and doing a lot of opportunity, and that would then start to stimulate construction activity in the valley. But we would just be a bit player in that. So those are the two things that came out of it. But the value of the tax benefits goes down with time. So if the tax benefits are what drives it, it has to be decided fairly quickly.
So hopefully we'll have a discussion with all the parties. Frank, too, would like to be part of that. So hopefully we can have a discussion and see if there's anything to it. Second thing was, again, Bob did a very nice job. The idea of larger buildings taking out the propane, or not necessarily taking it out, but using electricity-driven heat pumps. And we've decided that we will submit an application to the UC Berkeley to see if in there, what's the program called? The Energy?
It's called the Energy Corps. It's a summer program for students to do applied research projects.
Yeah, so this would be a feasibility study. Again, a lot of interest, particularly for Mountain Club. And John Wien has expressed interest in participating with some of the properties that they manage. So this would be a research project that would launch in May sometime and be done by the summertime, and just to explore the feasibility of heat pumps to either be the primary source of heat rather than propane. This, of course, would increase demand for electricity, help us aim toward reducing electric rates, and Bob believes that in the next 10 to 15 years, we will have to do something about the greenhouse gases that are associated with the burning of propane. So this would be a step towards understanding what we might be able to do.
Yeah. So, Brandy, I'd like to update you on that, and then get your advice on it. But if we want to I volunteered to hire a summer student to do this. They would have the resources from various portions of UC Berkeley and also UC Davis, and then Frank and I would work to supervise it. I think the other thing we could look at is saying if we wanted to replace all propane heat with electric heat, what would that look like? Is it feasible, and what would the tariffs need to be to do that? Because maybe we can avoid buying the third tank with a program that actually reduces it. So, I mean, if you use resistive electric heat, it's way more expensive than propane. But is there a price even for resistive heat where we're better off? Is there an efficient way to meter it separately? But given what's happened with propane lately, having a plan, starting to think about, is there a way to phase it out and shift it to be all electric? And can we do that in a way that's where everybody's better off? I think that's the big question in my mind. And heat pumps is a way of doing it in the larger buildings much more efficiently than resistive heat, because you're pulling heat out of the earth that supplements the heat generated from electricity.
The third topic was Out Valley cameras and drone service to inspect or view the Out Valley line. Rick gave us a nice report. They'd done some research, had gotten a quote for drone service, so we know what that would cost. It would cost $4,000 a year plus hourly charges for use. But I guess our conclusion at the committee level anyway was that it's going to be better to try to piggyback on others' efforts, like the Forest Service's efforts and so on, to install cameras where wildfire risk is high, and try to influence that to be located in a way that we can also see our outlying lines. Basically, Rick was saying there is no substitute for staff getting down there and looking at the line, and be a better investment to put into a snowmobile that can drive over through powder than putting it into cameras and the drone surface. And there were, that was basically it.
Bob, anything else on IT?
No, we haven't met since last meeting.
Operations?
I don't think we left anything out, did we? It was pretty much focused on snow removal.
And finance?
Two other topics we talked about were a renewed effort to get people to get their bills by email and pay by ACH. And secondly, Brandy presented some data reviewing our cost savings by purchasing day of electricity as opposed to hedged electricity. And we agreed, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're not at a disadvantage doing day of purchases, and even Shell didn't offer us the opportunity to hedge. Is that correct? Right. And then a more substantive portion of the Finance Committee meeting is we sent Eric and Brandy to some classes, and they came back with topics that the CSDA recommended we put in place, including GASB 7475, reserve guidelines, SB 1029, local debt policy. Yeah, this begs the question of whether we should have sent them to that class. Investment policy, and AB 1234, reimbursement policy. And that all encompasses 238 out of 258 pages in the most recent Finance Committee package. And so we agreed to parcel those up among committee members to address over the next 6 months and hopefully solve before November 1st. Is that what we covered?
That's it. That's your report?
Yep.
Good. The temporary committee report?
Eric and Rick, I believe, have a meeting set up finally with the county February 14th. Is it, Rick? Eric thought it was February 14th, but he wasn't sure of the exact date.
I confirmed with Terry Woodrow yesterday. We're going to meet Nicole Williams and Terry Woodrow, Chief Hughes, on Tuesday the 19th, I believe at 11 a.m. down at the Health and Human Services office.
Great. So this is a meeting in which we hope to get some more detail or a better understanding of what it is the county had in mind. Again, remember, this was followed a summertime meeting that we had with county staff, at which we suggested that we could use some assistance from the property taxes we pay to help us with our budget for the fire department. Again, I kind of thought that would fall on reluctant ears, and in fact, there were more forthcoming in possibilities than I thought they would be, and that's what that's why we've been holding up on other things, because if something like this can happen, we may not have to go for a special tax. However, because it's taken this long and we don't know what the outcome is going to be, Eric is preparing an request for proposals to send out to Prop 218 type consultants, so that ultimately we could develop a special tax based on intensity of use of a property to supplement the fees we already pay based on size of property, size of buildings on properties. He will have that done by the end of this month, and he's going to have Rick and me review it before he sends it out. So hopefully there'll be more to report in March from this meeting and from the RFPs.
Very good. Thank you. General discussion? Anybody have anything for the board? If not, I think we will be adjourning the meeting at 10:08. And thank you very much, everyone.